The first time she reached for my hand, it wasn't because she loved me. It was because two strangers standing in the doorway of an open house smiled warmly, looked at us, and said they made such a beautiful married couple. Before I could awkwardly correct them, my realtor squeezed my hand, smiled with a softness that caught even me off guard, and quietly said, "Not yet." In that tiny moment, surrounded by polished hardwood floors and freshly painted walls, something shifted inside both of us. Neither of us knew that a simple misunderstanding inside a house neither of us owned would become the beginning of a story that neither of us could have imagined. Before we continue, if you enjoy emotional stories about hope, second chances, and unexpected love, please like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who believes in new beginnings, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness so you never miss another heartfelt journey. Just 6 months earlier, I wasn't searching for a dream home. I was trying to survive the ruins of the life I thought would last forever. My marriage had ended after years of slowly growing apart until silence became louder than every argument we had ever had. The divorce wasn't dramatic, but somehow that made it hurt even more. We divided furniture, signed papers, exchanged tired smiles, and walked away carrying invisible pieces of ourselves that could never be returned. I rented a small apartment with blank white walls that echoed every lonely evening. Friends encouraged me to move forward, but moving forward sounded much easier than actually taking the first step. Buying a house felt impossible. It wasn't just about money. It meant believing I deserved another future. My sister finally convinced me to speak with a realtor she trusted. She described her as patient, honest, and someone who cared more about people than commissions. That was how I met Emily. She wasn't the loud, overly cheerful salesperson I expected. Instead, she listened more than she spoke. She asked about neighborhoods, work, and budget, but she also asked what home meant to me. I didn't have an answer. After a long silence, I admitted I wasn't looking for perfection. I just wanted somewhere that didn't remind me of everything I had lost. She nodded as though she understood every word that remained unspoken. Over the following weeks, we visited house after house. Some were too expensive. Others felt cold despite beautiful designs. A few seemed almost perfect until hidden problems appeared behind freshly painted walls. Emily never rushed me. Even when I apologized for wasting her time, she simply smiled and reminded me that people shouldn't settle for the place where they plan to rebuild their lives. Slowly our conversations became less about square footage and more about family traditions, favorite meals, old memories, and dreams we had quietly buried. She spoke about losing her father years earlier and how helping families find homes reminded her that every ending made room for another beginning. I found myself looking forward to every showing, even the disappointing ones. One bright Saturday afternoon we attended a crowded open house in a peaceful neighborhood lined with old maple trees. Children rode bicycles on quiet streets while neighbors waved from front porches. The house itself wasn't extraordinary, yet it felt warm from the moment we stepped inside. Sunlight poured through oversized windows, filling every room with a gentle glow. I wandered into the kitchen imagining Sunday breakfasts that hadn't existed in years. For the first time since my divorce, I could picture laughter replacing silence. That was when the elderly couple approached us. They admired the house for a moment before congratulating us on finding such a lovely place to begin our married life. My instinct was to laugh and explain that Emily was simply my realtor. Before I spoke, she looked at me with sparkling eyes, held my hand naturally, and answered with a quiet confidence, "Not yet." The couple chuckled, wished us happiness, and continued through the house. I stood frozen while she released my hand only after they disappeared around the corner. We both laughed awkwardly, but neither of us could ignore the strange warmth left behind by those two simple words. Driving home, the silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. Instead, it was filled with questions neither of us dared ask. I replayed that moment again and again. Had she been joking? Had I imagined the tenderness in her voice? I reminded myself that professional boundaries existed for a reason. She was helping a client. Nothing more. Yet somehow everything had already begun to feel different. Over the next several weeks, our friendship deepened without either of us noticing exactly when it crossed from professional to personal. We discovered a shared love for rainy afternoons, old bookstores, roadside diners, and volunteering at local shelters. She invited me to help paint a community center one weekend, insisting extra hands were always welcome. Watching her encourage children who had almost nothing reminded me that kindness could be stronger than heartbreak. She treated everyone with the same quiet respect, whether they owned million-dollar homes or barely had enough to pay rent. Just when life finally seemed hopeful again, reality interrupted. The owner accepted another buyer's higher offer for the house we both secretly loved. I was devastated, though I tried to hide it. Emily looked almost as disappointed as I felt. She apologized repeatedly even though none of it was her fault. For several days I considered giving up entirely. Maybe I wasn't meant to begin again. Maybe that warm feeling inside the open house had simply been another dream that wasn't mine to keep. Instead of letting me disappear, Emily surprised me one Saturday morning with coffee and a folded list of new properties. She admitted she believed one of them was even better than the first house. I trusted her enough to keep trying. That decision changed everything. The final house stood at the end of a quiet street beside a small park where children laughed beneath enormous oak trees. It wasn't larger or more luxurious than the others, but something about it immediately felt peaceful. The backyard overlooked a small creek where sunlight shimmered across the water. Standing there, I realized I wasn't imagining escaping my past anymore. I was imagining building a future. A week later my offer was accepted. On closing day, after signing what felt like endless paperwork, I walked through my empty house carrying nothing except a single cardboard box and an overwhelming mixture of gratitude and fear. Emily handed me the keys with a proud smile that reflected every obstacle we had overcome together. As she turned to leave, I realized I didn't want this chapter to end with a handshake and polite goodbye. Taking one nervous breath, I asked whether she would allow me to thank her with dinner instead of another email. She laughed softly before admitting she had been hoping I would ask ever since that unforgettable open house. We spent hours talking that evening without mentioning contracts, inspections, or mortgages. For the first time in years, I forgot what loneliness felt like. Months passed, and the house slowly transformed into a home filled with framed photographs, shared meals, weekend gardening projects, and countless moments that never appeared extraordinary on their own but became priceless together. Every room collected memories instead of echoes. Friends noticed I smiled more. My family said I sounded lighter. Even difficult days no longer felt impossible because I wasn't carrying them alone. Exactly 1 year after that open house misunderstanding, I invited Emily back to the same neighborhood. The house had long since belonged to someone else, but the sidewalk where everything quietly began remained unchanged. Standing beneath the evening sky, I thanked her for helping me find much more than a place to live. Then I reached into my pocket, held out a small ring, and reminded her of the words she had spoken that day. With tears shining in both our eyes, I smiled and asked if perhaps it was finally time to replace "not yet" with "yes." If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need a reminder that life can still surprise them with unexpected joy. Before this story ends, tell us in the comments, do you believe one small moment can completely change the direction of a person's life? Emily said yes before I even finished asking. Looking back now, I understand that I never truly went searching for another house. I was searching for permission to believe that broken hearts can heal, lonely seasons can end, and ordinary moments can quietly become extraordinary memories. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with grand speeches or perfect timing. Sometimes it begins with a misunderstanding, a gentle smile, and 2 simple words spoken inside an ordinary open house. Those words reminded me that hope doesn't always knock loudly. Sometimes it whispers, waits patiently, and changes your entire life when you're finally ready to hear it.